that I would like to introduce. From the background that you can see here, I'm based out of Amsterdam. Ozlem is also based out of Amsterdam. So city mates, it's nice. Ozlem is the managing partner of SparkUs. And I'm super looking forward to your presentation, Ozlem. Over to you.
Thank you, Dirk. And talking about your background, I have the tulips behind me, so it is really
wonderful. We're in sync.
Yeah, so we're apparently making a hello to Amsterdam generally. Thank you for the introduction, and it's good to be back on the Core HR platform again. But most of the time, I was presenting in L&D or Agility Day. So it's the first time I'm on the Analytics Day, because I think when we're thinking about analytics, we don't tend to focus on, coaching. We tend to focus on other areas of HR. And I believe it's a different experience in that sense. But of course, organizational transformation, as we've just listened, is like a very broad area that is already happening elsewhere. So it's not only in the organizations, actually, it is also, there is a huge transformation happening everywhere in the world, basically. So we unfortunately have wars. But we also have trade wars. We also have talent wars. We have supply chain crisis. We have great resignation. We have the hybrid workplace. So there is a lot of things that are happening both outside the organization, and some of them are indirectly affecting us. Some of them are directly affecting us. So there is a lot of things that are changing right now. And this was also reflected on one of the studies we've done. We recently did a survey with HR people, and coming from a digital coaching background, of course, we originally focused on coaching topics, but we started from a bigger perspective, first asking where to focus our efforts on. And when we asked about the priorities of the HR, what we saw was, our priorities are much more about leadership development, organizational development, and well-being, while at the same time, we also asked what changed in the post-pandemic. In the periods of the early days of the pandemic, of course, our focus was more around short-term gains, short-term problems that we were trying to solve, like keeping our people safe physically and emotionally. And it was also, rearranging the workplace where we are all working from home, or just thinking about, models of hybrid, etc. But now that all those issues are a little bit behind us, a little bit we see what is about to come, we now can focus on the long-term issues. And when we ask what is gaining importance in post-pandemic, organizational development appeared among the others as number one. And so we need to start looking into those. And then we ask, of course, if you want to develop the organization, what are the areas that you want to develop the organization? And again, not surprisingly, leadership development happened to be number one, but we also had talent development, we also had diversity issues, also kind of reflecting of what's happening outside the world when we're talking about talent wars and diversity issues. But then we asked, okay, these are the areas that you want to focus. Are you happy? Are you satisfied with what you already have, with your efforts? And unfortunately, less than half of the participants said that they were happy, especially in areas of culture and organizational development. More than half of the participants were actually not happy. So that is an important, moment to a little bit lay back and look into why. And I just want to a little bit slow the process and think about what we're already doing right now, which is on one level working, but on one level doesn't. So when we're looking at the analytics of organizational transformation, we of course first look into business results, but then we also check, other information about retention rate, attrition rates, engagements, etc., etc. And when we have these data points, we tend to use them typically on the diagnosis. We can use those data points to say what needs to change in our organization, or we are using it afterwards, like a post-evaluation, like if that change that we were aiming at really happened. So the data is most of the time happening in those areas, while the transformation, the treatment, so as to say, is happening in between. We're looking at our obstacles, like where do we need to intervene in the organization, or to our options, like how can we achieve that change when we are working with those obstacles. And it's quite a, I would say, recurring issue. Then we do some things, then we come back, there are maybe new obstacles, then we're trying to intervene with those, etc. But when we look at in terms of the data, pre and post are very much numerical, but the real treatment generally happens to be quite anecdotal. And it's less numbers, more words that we're focusing on in the treatment phase. So what are those words that we're focusing on? Obviously our strategies. Then we are creating new strategies, we're creating new goals, maybe bringing in some scorecards. We are redesigning our processes around that. We are redesigning our organizational charts and redefining our competency models. And then once we set them, we say, okay, just setting down the strategy is not enough. Let's now focus on communication of this to the people. So we create these slogans, posters, banners, webinars, events to tell people what is going to change. But the famous words of Peter Drucker, that culture eats strategy at breakfast. So we need to start focusing on the culture aspect of it. And we are trying to make a change within the culture. The easy way out is hiring and firing, like bringing in the right people to the organization. And unfortunately, sometimes sparing our ways with people who are not fit with this culture. But most of the time, our focus is to keep the people in the organization. So we just do a lot of training, either e-learnings or real life training. But with most of these, we're just trying to tell people what to become. And we basically believe that in order to overcome the resistance that is coming from the people, even though you tell them, what would change, you need to start focusing more on coaching. Because paradoxical theory of change tells us that it's only when you meet people where they are, when you accompany them, then change happens as a natural outcome. Not when you tell them you should become this, but when you say, oh, okay, so you're here, what's happening here? Then change happens naturally and it sticks. So at coaching, for those who maybe are new to coaching, I would say that we work a lot with the inner resistances in the sessions. We listen. We listen to the what if fears. We listen to, oh, I don't know hows. We make people express, oh, but nothing will change. We've seen those kind of transformations in our company. Or we can also encounter like, yeah, it might have happened in that company or in that industry or in that geography, but wouldn't work in our place right now. So we have like the resistances. I don't have time. I don't have energy. I find this ridiculous. And we also have, even if I change, which is a very typical one, even if I change, others won't. So what is the point? So all of these are sometimes, very much visible to the individuals, but sometimes they even don't know that unless you sit down and talk about how they feel about this change. And very tricky part is it is very much different from one individual to the other. So there is no one size fits all solution. So we need to be listening to each one individual one by one. And that is reflected with the surveys that are done around research done around coaching, that coaching is actually an effective treatment for these topics. But then we have a problem. When we want to go to each one individual, it is not possible to scale it to everyone. Coaching is an expensive service because it requires one individual in the organization spending at least a few hours with another individual who are trained to become a coach. It could be an external coach, it could be an internal coach, doesn't matter. It requires, basically 2 human hours at the minimum. And the industry standard is generally, like 8 to 12 sessions per individual. So it is not possible to scale it to everyone. And even if we decide to say like, okay, we're going to spend all these resources, even if we say like, okay, I'm not going to do just one by one select people and give coaching to those that I believe would create a change in the organization. And even if we say, okay, we're going for everyone, then comes another issue. How are we going to generate data on coaching? Because unlike other things like trainings or any other events that we are doing, coaching is covered by confidentiality. And we need that because only then that people share their resistances. Only then, without thinking like, oh, maybe this would be looking really badly for me, for my performance review or something, they really express themselves. So the power of coaching comes from confidentiality, then we can create the change. But the same confidentiality creates us the issue of data generation. Then we cannot monitor what's going on. So the dilemma we have here is, if we know that coaching is a good treatment here, but how do we scale and monitor our coaching treatment? And I say your solution lies in coaching technologies, where you can prepare people via digital self-coaching exercises that help you scale, measure, and optimize the experience that would be fit for your organization's strategic goals of transformation. And how does it work? It is always a blended approach. First, individuals go through some self-coaching exercises that are designed in line with whatever you want to achieve in the organization. So it is the place where people slow down and get in touch with their own reality. They express themselves. And then they are matched with a coach, and then have their sessions with the coach. But since they've already done some work on the platform, they spend less time with the coach. Rather than spending the industry standard of 8 to 12 sessions, maybe 1 to 3 sessions would be enough for them. Why? Because the person is much more aware when they're coming to the coaching session about where they are, but also the coach is also very much aware where the person is coming from, so that they can make the interventions at the right place where there is the most resistance, or where they're going to make the most impact. And while all this is happening, lovely part is that we can generate lots of data. We can track sessions and developments without breaching the confidentiality of the coaching process. We turn whatever they are talking about into numbers. So we can measure the engagement of the coachee to the coaching process, whether they have completed their part on the digital exercises. We can measure their evaluation based on the company competencies. And we can also have the managers evaluate them, so we can just measure the gaps in between. We can involve the managers for the development goals approval. And we can also track the number of sessions, track the number of actions, whether those actions are taken. We can track the live scoring of achievement of development goals. And just we were talking about net promoter scores, we can generate a lot of data around the net promoter scores. And how do we use this information that we generate in the service of organizational transformation. So here are some examples. First example is a case where the organization wants to improve their engagement scores. In the past, what they used to do was, doing an engagement score at the beginning of the year, recognizing the areas, then creating certain policies and certain trainings, and the next year round doing another research, seeing how things changed. Now what we're providing is actually a hand-holding for the leaders, especially those who are below average of the organization. So the leaders are going through digital coaching exercises to self-reflect on their engagement scores, and also to generate action plans out of it, also to express their inner resistances to these results. And once they do their action planning, then they have talks with the HR business partners. And only if we see the need to support them even further, then they have one-on-one coaching with a professional coach, or they are directed towards team coaching. So this is the program, let's say. And what are the data that we can generate out of it? One of the things that we can watch is mapping of the commitment of the leaders to the process. So I don't know if you're able to see the screen in detail, but the screen is a anonymous data of it, so you would find some funny names around. For instance, this Larry King guy basically didn't complete much of the process. So his way of getting support would be different than John Doe up here, who completed everything. So we can then support each leader differently. We can watch the action plannings, and we can have a traction about whether those actions are completed. We can watch their progress reports on development areas. We can involve top management per leader when required. And we're able to track on a live manner while the treatment is happening, to see where to make some interventions throughout the process. So it won't be a surprise at the end of the year when we have a second round of checks. We would make sure that we tried our best throughout this period for the hand-holding and increasing of the engagement results. Another case is where we have a talent development program, and it helps the retention of the talents, especially very important in this period of talent wars. So the program looks like a typical talent development program at one level. So we have more than 100 talents that go through digital coaching exercises to define their development areas, and then they receive 2 to 3 sessions with professional coaches. But thanks to the work that they do on the platform, we can generate a number of information that helps their talent strategy. One is we are able to monitor what are the development areas, development needs of the talents. And then we are able to link those with the other L&D tools of the organization. We integrate it with their LMS. So they can go through different trainings as well as their sessions with the coaches. But more than that, up to this is the development of the talents. Then we are able to be aware of the blind spots of the talents. What we figured out is some of the technical talents especially were focusing very much on their technical development and ignoring the other areas like their communication, like their leadership skills, that would keep them moving within the organization in their career path. So we were able to map those blind spots. And to help them with those blind spots, we integrated the managers to evaluate the development areas and saying like, well, you need to focus maybe more on this. But then we also found out that actually half of the managers supported their talents and half didn't. And you know that famous saying that people join organizations and leave their managers. Then it means that those managers who are not really supporting their people, their talents especially, would probably cause us to lose those talents. So now we're working on the strategies on how to support the managers to support their talents in the organization. And another intervention area that we found out was some of the talents, especially working in smaller geographies, were seeing that their career paths were blocked. They saw that, oh, this is a small geography, I don't have enough next steps in this organization, so basically I should look elsewhere for my next steps. So now we're working on a new talent pipeline strategy based on those data that we generated. And last but not least, of course, since we can just download all those data, the organization is also making some other correlations with their career moments within the organization. So to sum it up, with a digital coaching technology, what you're able to do is create a framework for your coaching dialogues to make sure that they are running in line with your transformation strategy. It's not just talk, there is a structure to it. The other part is you can optimize the coaching experience and save up to 75%. More is achieved in less time. And you can measure the results. And you have real-time actionable data that you can monitor while the treatment is actually happening. So these are all I'm going to share. I think we have some time left. I'm very much happy to answer any questions that might be. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ozlem. I really like this presentation because as companies are rethinking operating models and even redefine what their core is, companies and leaders will go through lots of change. Yeah. And this is exactly what you addressed. And I think you absolutely nailed it with the focus on org development, leadership development, and well-being. Yeah. Now, you have literally hundreds and hundreds of people in this call listening to your presentation. And you showed super nicely how you measure the process, how many people went through all of the steps. Mm-hmm. I think the people might also be interested in how do you measure the impact of coaching. And Sergey in the session chat, thanks Sergey, by the way, for your question. He asked also about these productivity measures. How do you measure the impact of coaching?
We always start with, first sitting down with the organization and understanding what they want to achieve once they're running a coaching program. So it's not just like, let's have some coaches for some people, but it is more about, this is the audience and this is what we want to achieve. And then we integrate those success criteria into the coaching process so that we can keep a track of those movements, let's say. If the topic is productivity, we can ask about those questions. We can just give them, we always give some evaluation forms, for instance, at the end of the coaching sessions, asking whether they improved, let's say, their productivity, whether their next steps are clear, how they moved in their development areas. So there can be some, on one level, self declaration by the coachee. But we always also integrate, not always, but most of the time, let's say, we integrate their managers, and the managers can evaluate the people. We can integrate the competency models of the organization, for instance, to the platform. And the manager can evaluate, the person can evaluate pre and post the coaching process. Yeah. So we can see the gaps, whether there is some movement. It is also sometimes tricky that sometimes people evaluate themselves higher before starting the coaching process because they're not aware of their development needs, but the manager then gives them a much more realistic perspective, let's say. So those kind of information we can generate. What we can also do is we can do 360s on the platform. So we can arrange the questions of the 360s in line with whatever we want to achieve with the program. So again, depending on what the program is, if it's a, let's say, female leadership program, the questions we would ask in the 360 would be different than if it's a productivity program or if it's a transformation program. It really depends. So, but the key thing is really understanding from day one what the company wants to achieve with coaching and integrating those measurement items throughout the process as a part of the coaching process.
Cool. I think quite a few leaders on this call have coaches themselves. So absolutely, it is very important. And I also think that sometimes you cannot always measure exactly the impact, even though you know it has great impact. But maybe one of the other things that you could look at is, for example, is the voluntary turnover or the engagement of the coaches team, for example, improving. When I saw one of the screenshots of your beautiful solution, I saw that one of the first steps is to create a vision board.
Yeah.
What is a vision board?
Vision board is where we mostly start at the beginning, let's say. With the coaching, we always have a future focus. And vision board is where the individuals connect their visions for the future, for their life, or it could be for what kind of a leader they want to turn into, what kind of a department they want to run. And but it first starts creating them a real image of how it looks like, a real vision of how it looks like. But we generally help them to match that vision with whatever is happening in the organization. So most of the time, people don't have that bridge between, what the organization asked them to do versus what they want to achieve in their life. So once you create that bridge, the change is much more easy, then all the resistances go a little bit down. So it's like, oh, in order to create that, then I need it. But with the vision board, we give them, sometimes photos to select from, and we give them some audio files to listen to create the imagination. Some people are more visually understanding and some are auditory, obviously. So, but that's a very important place to start, which is something typically done in coaching, but not much so in other, HR tools that we're using. We're just most of the time just asking them, what is your goal? And they're just like, I really don't know. What did you write? What did I write? What should I write? It's not going inside. So the vision board helps them to go inside and just get in touch with their reality, really.
Thanks. There is a question of Pernilla, which basically also leads to the next speaker, Toby of Amazon. But this is around the definition of talent. What is talent, Ozlem?
Oh, wonderful question. Wonderful question. Well, in our case, if you're asking me as a coach, I believe everybody is a talent. So we believe in the potential of the people. Of course, most of the time when we're doing talent development in organizations are giving us some people saying like, these are our talents. But basically what we're trying to do is make people, whoever is coming into coaching, to be aware of their, as Sir Ken Robinson says, their elements, like the things that make them, flow throughout the day, what they're really good at, what they want to really leverage on. So most of the time we are focusing on those areas in coaching. And as I mentioned, anybody who's coming to a coaching session is talent of some sort for me, because they probably have some real good talent somewhere. Maybe it's not a good fit with their role, then we can describe that and then maybe find them, make them find a route to another place within the organization. Most of the time, it's much more happening, especially with reskilling and upskilling efforts now. It's really beautiful to make people aware of their other talents, let's say. But yeah, most of the time clients describe, for me, everybody's a talent.
I kind of like that. So not really focused on the person, but really talent is something that together we discover what it is for you, what it means for you, and how we can fully put you, up for success to use your talent. and to
Exactly.
develop it. Fantastic. Ozlem, thanks very much for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
And well, I'm sure we'll see each other for a coffee since we're in the same city.
Sure we will. Sure we will.
That